Nera rubbed her manipulating appendages together excitedly as she skittered down the halls of the space station. Her sectoid legs made soft tip taps on the stainless steel floor. Her two large, emerald compound eyes absorbed all the information around her as she dodged another career, their lobster-like abdomens scraping against each other. They raised their mantis-like bladed arms in an annoyed stance, and she wiggled her antennae back at them in apology. She was in too much of a hurry to offer a proper apology. The new species was here to look at her work, and she needed to be prepared. Her mandibles clicked together as she thought about the new members of the galactic stage. Unlike the Vero, they were mammalian. However, they were much smaller. The tops of their furry heads barely reached her people's lower stomach, right at the center of her grasping appendages. Yet she had heard that they were so dense that a warrior couldn't budge them running full tilt. It was perplexing until she had heard that they hailed from a Category 13 death world with 4.5 times the gravity of their own homeworld, the highest rating any planet that harbored sentient life had ever gotten. Sure, there were the Noah who hailed from the Category 8 death world, but they were still relatively normal. One of her colleagues mentioned that their scientists said if their gravity was any higher, they would not have made it off their planet. It was difficult as it was to leave the atmosphere. But that wasn't the strangest thing about them. Nera had gotten her manipulators on a pamphlet describing their anatomy, something all the other members of the galactic community had reluctantly shared only after many rotations. Their anatomy was overbuilt would be her descriptor. They had one head, a common trait among the community, but their brain was split into 2 hemispheres. They had 2 eyes, but their eyes had 6 muscles that helped move their irises. Then there was their breathing system. They moved oxygen around their bodies with things called lungs, sacks of flesh that expanded and diffused oxygen into their bloodstream, which was iron-based instead of copper like hers, and needed far less oxygen than the Krier themselves and many of the other species. In fact, their atmosphere only had 21% oxygen in it, 20% less than anyone else. It was insane and made Nera's elongated head spin. She shook her head as she stopped in front of the red airlock where she was meant to meet her guests. She could think about their crazy anatomy later. Right now, she needed to focus on presenting her work. She was quite proud of it as well. V should be nearly done showing them the lab. I should make a grand entrance. Nera clacked her mandibles together loudly to get the attention of their guests. Bri turned first, her 9 eyes facing in all directions on top of her fuzzy body. The humans, she thought they were called, turned afterward, and almost immediately jumped back, their eyes dilating to pinpoints. One of the 3 had placed an appendage at their hip, looking for something that wasn't there. That one had a thick bar of fur above their mouth, stark white and seemingly well-groomed. The fur atop his head was also white, smooth back and glistening in the light of the planet below and the lights above. "It's a xenomorph," one of them whispered, their gruff voice not translating well through the translator. One of them had turned entirely white, a seemingly younger human with a green suit on. He kind of looked like a cron leaf. His face was entirely hairless while his head was adorned with bright gold fur. Muttering to the one next to him, he said, "Listen, if I get face hugged, shoot me. Just shoot me." The one in green muttered to the one in gray, their face bright green. The one being spoken to was swallowing hard and shaking, possibly a fear response. He had less hair than his older companion, but a small patch of fur on his chin and no fur on his head. Nera tilted her head and slowly clicked at them in a confused way, swiveling her elongated head almost entirely around before looking back at the humans. "I do not know what a xenomorph is. I don't see anyone in the vicinity other than myself and my colleague here," she stated simply, watching their reaction. Their chests seemed to rise and fall slowly as they took a closer look at her. The older human with the fur above its mouth looked at her with predatory eyes, slowly gliding along her entire length, making her antennae stand on end. It wasn't a good sensation, and she was glad when it ended. "You're right. I apologize. You look very similar to a monster from one of our old horror movies, but you're very different." Nera rubbed her striking appendages together as she took several steps forward, towering over the humans. The young one in the green suit turned an even paler white as she did, taking several steps back himself. The human shouted the last line more at his companions rather than at Nera, both of them snapping to a more upright position. He nodded and turned back to her, extending an appendage toward her own. "I'm sorry about our conduct." It was a knee-jerk reaction. We were given a briefing on who we would be meeting, but in all honesty, I wasn't paying much attention to anything other than the mention of stealth ships. He made this soft, strange chuffing sound as he looked up at her, seemingly waiting for something. She looked down at him and simply stared, absorbing this information. So she was frightening to them and couldn't really do anything about it. Unfortunate, but maybe she would get to see more of those fascinating reactions. "What are you doing with your appendage?" she asked, pointing to it with her own manipulators. The human looked down at his, then at her, and kept his appendage held right there. "It's a handshake." "It's a formal greeting from my species," he grunted back, leaning forward and taking her manipulator in his hand. "You move it up and down like this." Nera slowly mimicked the movement until their appendages separated, the older human's lips curling up and showing his teeth. It made her antennae twitch again, and she pulled her manipulator back to herself. "Interesting. Well, I'm Nera, the head scientist of research and development here at the station. You're here for a demonstration of our newest stealth technology, aren't you?" "Well, I'll give you this, your vessels are beautiful," the human in gray muttered, eyes finally looking away from her as his gaze locked onto the ships. Todd seemed to stroke the fur above his lip again. Nera was starting to suspect it was a habit he had when he was thinking. He also appeared to be appreciating the ships. They slowly came to a stop several clicks away from the station, far enough away not to be affected by its gravitational pull. The grav generator did strange things to ships under a certain size when they got too close. "But I'm not seeing much stealth," Todd grunted, turning to Nera with an expectant look. She bounced up and down in agreement, her flared tail slapping the ground with light thunks. "Yes, their stealth modules are currently offline. I was hoping we could show off the rest of their abilities first." "Strange, he could probably rip off her legs easily." "How so?" "I don't want this to impact the demonstration. If I can alleviate any misunderstanding, I will," she said, gesturing to the other two. The older human seemed much calmer now, stroking the hair above his lip and looking up at her as she spoke. "Well, to start, your head is tubular, which is very much like said species. Nothing you can do about that. Then there's your back. You have biomechanical tubes poking out at about the right spots like they do, and your carapace is nearly pitch black." He stated matter-of-factly, extending a small grasping appendage as he counted off each similarity. Each one made the white human shake harder, his eyes never leaving her. "But you have mantis-like arms above your grasping appendages and a more lobster-like lower half, as well as pretty large mandibles over your mouth, and you have eyes, which they don't have. So my own colleagues need to calm down and shape up." She clicked coyly, watching them as she skipped right ahead to the beginning of the presentation. The older human's eyes narrowed as the two younger ones smoothed their suits, the one in green no longer a pale white, the one in gray a more pink color now. "Yes, we are." "Strange way to jump into the conversation," he growled, the translator still having trouble picking up his voice. "Don't be a grumpy bastard, Todd. She's a scientist, not a damn door-to-door salesman." "The eggheads at home are just as awkward," the one in green bluntly told the older human. Todd was his name, apparently. Nera was loving all this new information she was getting about the humans. Todd slowly looked back at the man in green without emoting. A beaming grin plastered on the human in green as he grunted. "Fair enough. Guess I should cut her some slack." His chest expanded and shrank again before he flung his arm outward and gestured for Nera to move forward, or so she assumed. It was quite similar to the Viro's gesture of "get on with it." "All right, lead the way, Miss Nera." Nera excitedly turned and clicked twice towards Barai, who squealed back and hopped away. This was Nera's show, and V knew that as she disappeared behind the airlock she had sauntered through. She turned towards the window and pulled out a data pad, tapping a few spots on its surface. "Well, it's a good thing we have this amazing view, isn't it? Great backdrop for some science," she exclaimed excitedly as 4 long ships started coming around the edge of the planet. They looked almost like spearheads with crescent wings sprouting from their back ends, the sharp tips pointed towards the front, their silvery surface sparkling in the light of the planet. One of the humans made a high-pitched sound beside her as the ship grew closer. "They are the first of their class built by my people," after all, she said mischievously. In all honesty, she just wanted to show off the work of her and her colleagues. They had all put their minds together for many rotations to make these ships, and that made her quite proud of her team. "What other features are you going to show off? I thought this whole trip was to see your stealth modules, not to see you show off." "I'm missing the Battlebee finale for this." Todd turned towards the one in green, who had seemingly struck a nerve, walking over with heavy clanks coming from the metal floor as his much denser body put more stress on it. "Jeremy, let the lady show off her toys. "You're already here, you can't miss your stupid show anymore." He struck the back of Jeremy's head, a popping sound coming from the impact as Jeremy rubbed the spot, wincing in pain and seemingly making a face. As Todd looked at the human in gray, he growled, "Got anything to add, Walker?" Walker shook his head side to side hurriedly, raising his manipulating appendages and waving them as well. "Nope, nothing, sir. I'd love to see the other features this lovely lady worked on," he answered back hurriedly, making Nara tilt her head curiously. These humans really were fascinating, and if she could, she'd study them all day, but she needed to continue. "Thank you, Todd. Well, we worked on quite a few things for these ships to do, like the new propulsion system." She tapped her appendage on her datapad, a buzzing coming from it as she connected her communicator to one of the ships outside, typing in something quickly. "Please move 30 clicks up at full speed." She let go of the button and watched as the furthest ship on the left's back end slowly turned downwards, almost swiveling like her own head. The ship shot upward suddenly, getting up to 30 clicks in only a few minutes. Todd let out a noise the translator didn't quite know what to make of. Nara turned and looked at him, her mandibles rubbing together as the ship came to a stop. "We've improved the movement speed, shortening the time from 8 time units to move 30 clicks to only 6 units. It was quite a bit of work. The gravitational force on the pilots was harsh until V was able to use a bit of her knowledge to improve the dampeners." Jeremy looked at Todd, who seemed to be silent, then to Walker, who was biting his lip with his teeth. Another oddity of humans, but so were everyone's methods of eating. "You can't be serious," Jeremy seemed to say in utter disbelief. "What do you mean, Jeremy?" Nara asked, her emerald eyes shimmering as she also expressed disbelief. The humans had to be impressed by this. Really, Jeremy commented, Todd giving him a scowl which shut him up very quickly. But this time, Walker jumped into the conversation instead, continuing where he left off. "That's it. We could have blown that asteroid to smithereens and then some with our ship, and we have a diplomatic ship that's pretty underwhelming." Todd smacked him on the back of the head. It seemed there was also a habit of Todd's. These three must be very familiar with one another if they were so comfortable showing off their strength and willingness to use force around her. "If you say another word, I'm going to wax your entire body and make you go to your wedding that way," he muttered. Walker turned pale like Jeremy had earlier. "That's actually amazing. We've been looking for something like that. The higher-ups have been complaining about needing to be halfway to the Kuiper Belt before jumping out," Todd commented, his blue eyes gleaming with interest. Nara's antennae waved up and down happily as she rubbed her manipulating appendages together, a soft shake emanating from them as her carapace rubbed together. She had thought the plasma cannon would have been their favorite so far, but this was wonderful. "Yes, we are also looking for a solution to that problem.